We're sure this makes us kind of bad people when we do lists like this because, in horror, you don't really want to say, oh, that person got exactly what they deserved. But that's actually exactly what we're here to do. I'm Sean Ferrick for What Culture Horror, and here are 10 horror victims who got exactly what they deserved. Number 10, Aidan and Mia, The Lodge. In The Lodge, father of two Richard Hall leaves his wife for another woman, driving his former partner to die by suicide. Richard's children, Aidan and Mia, refuse to accept their father's new love, Grace, believing she's to blame for their mother's death. When Richard leaves his kids with Grace for a few days, they decide to gaslight her to leave. Discovering that Grace suffers mental instability from her time in a death cult, Aidan and Mia take away her medication and play disturbing recordings around the house, hoping to drive her crazy. Over time, Grace convinces herself that she's in purgatory and must seek penance for her sins. When Richard returns, she shoots him dead in front of the children and forces them to have dinner with his corpse. Even though it's horrible to watch the kids lose their father soon after their mother took her own life, it's their fault. They did everything they could to break Grace, despite her being nothing but nice to them. When Mia walked on thin ice to grab her doll, Grace stopped her from falling through, saving her life. When Grace fell into the icy water immediately after, the kids did nothing to help her. Even though she nearly sacrificed her life for kids who resented her, they still made her have a mental breakdown. For that reason, it's a bit hard to sympathise for Aidan and Mia, despite the horrific fate they endured. Number 9. Addison Saw 2. Most of the victims in the Saw franchise suffered a very fitting end. After all, the reason why they were chosen for Jigsaw's little tests was often because they were kind of a piece of crap to begin with. However, Addison from Saw 2 deserves special mention since she went bent over backwards to get herself killed. Poisoned by a toxic nerve gas, Addison scours the area for the antidote which Jigsaw has hidden away, eventually discovering a syringe filled with that antidote inside a glass container. As she places her hand through the container's bottom, she realizes the opening is bladed, which will slit her wrist if she pulls her arm out. Not only that, she spills the antidote while trying to grab it, rendering it useless. Just to prove she hasn't learned anything, Addison then places her other hand in the box. But why? The antidote is gone, and now she has no chance of freeing herself. You could argue Addison was going to die anyway once the poison ravaged her body, but if Addison looked at the razor box longer than 2 seconds, she would have seen there was a lock on the back with the key already inside it. Number 8. Helen, I Know What You Did Last Summer. Slashers are often filled with one-dimensional nobodies who are just there to rack up the kill count. More often than not, these characters only have themselves to blame when they meet their maker. Which brings us to Helen from I Know What You Did Last Summer. At first, she proves to be surprisingly resourceful when confronted with the hooked maniac, the fisherman. After being led to a dead end, Helen evades the killer by stepping on a manual elevator and winching herself to the next floor. When the fisherman corners her again, Helen leaps out the window to the street below. Noticing a parade in the distance, Helen runs towards it, believing she'll find safety in numbers. Just as she's about to reach the parade, Helen stops dead in her tracks and turns around to double check if the fisherman is still chasing her. After turning back, the cloaked psychopath appears and guts her like a fish. Even if Helen suspected the fisherman was right behind her, why did she stop running? What did that accomplish apart from giving him enough time to catch up with her? Number 7. Mrs. Deagle, Gremlins. Okay, let's look at the true villain of Gremlins here. Not the titular critters, not Stripe, we're talking about Mrs. Deagle. The first thing this old bat does is barge into the bank while screaming at our hero, Billy Peltzer. Deagle yells at Billy in front of his clients and employees since his dog broke her Christmas decoration. She then threatens to have the mutt put down while smiling ear to ear, and you cannot wait to see this miserable crone get her comeuppance. Although it's horrifying to see the Gremlins terrorize and murder the townsfolk, viewers are on their side when they turn their attention to Mrs. Deagle. After hearing carolers outside, Deagle rushes to the front door, ready to chuck a jug of water on them. When she sees the singers are actually gremlins, she's horrified by their demonic appearance. While Deagle is distracted, one of the little devils breaks into her home and tweaks her stairs chairlift, and when she tries to use it to head upstairs, the chairlift shoots around the house at lightning speed, catapulting her through the highest window. It's a horrible way for an old woman to go, but it might just be one of the most satisfying moments in the whole movie. Number 6. Braum Van Brunt, Sleepy Hollow. It's pretty foolish to face a supernatural entity, especially when there's no known way to destroy it. But in Sleepy Hollow, Braum Van Brunt takes it upon himself to face the Headless Horseman after he begins lopping off heads of the townsfolk. It's important to understand the decapitated spirit only targets specific people and has no ill will towards Braum. When the horseman casually walks by Braum, it's clear the cocky aristocrat isn't on his hit list. Nevertheless, Braum makes himself a target by directly attacking the headless revenant. Even though the horseman has every reason to murder Braum, he just whacks him with his pommel before storming off. Refusing to get the message, Braum hurls a knife at the horseman, compelling him to return the favour. Still desperate to prove himself, Braum continues to fight his assailant despite the fact he's immortal. The horseman finally realises this guy isn't gonna back down, compelling him to slice Braum in two. The horseman may be a malevolent force, but he was nice enough to give his attacker multiple chances to walk away. Since Braum refused to back down, it can only really blame himself for how things turned out. Number 5. Liz, Wolf Creek. There are plenty of horror villains who refuse to kill their victim when they have the chance, which often leads to their downfall. As Wolf Creek proves, the heroes fall into this trope as well. In this very loosely based on true event story, backpackers Liz, Christy and Ben get trapped in the Australian outback after their car stalls. When a local, Mick Taylor, invites them back to his shack to fix their vehicle, it looks like their prayers have been answered. But after Mick drugs the trio, Liz wakes up hours later, only to learn her so-called saviour is torturing Christy, preparing to slice her up. Luckily, Liz finds a nearby rifle and blasts the psycho in the neck. Even though this living nightmare could have ended then and there, Liz makes a decision that ultimately gets her and her friend killed. Not only does she not finish Mick off when she has the chance, she drops the gun. Although the girls try to escape, Mick manages to catch up and murder them both. Obviously, the pair could have escaped if Liz had the common sense to empty her entire clip on their captor. Number 4. Dr. Foley, Cult of Chucky. Cult of Chucky opens with Nika Pierce being institutionalized for the murder of her family. Although Nika insists the culprit is a living doll called Chucky, Dr. Foley dismisses her claims as a delusion. Even though Foley is completely in the wrong, he seems like a decent person who's trying to cure Nika of her psychosis. But when it's revealed Foley is a sexual predator who regularly abuses Nika, even Chucky balks at how evil this guy is. When Foley prepares to violate Nika in his office, Chucky smashes him over the head, rendering him unconscious. Although this is satisfying to watch, the perverted professor deserves much worse. Luckily, it's not over. Using his voodoo powers, the killer doll transfers his soul into Nika, and since Chucky has coveted a human body for well over a decade, he's desperate to test out his new body. So what's the first thing he does in his human form? He repeatedly stomps on Foley's face with Nika's high heels, reducing his skull to bloody mush. Since Foley is an irredeemable monster, this is among the few times in the Child's Play franchise where Chucky's sadistic actions are fully justified. Number 3. Louis Creed, Pet Sematary. Even when a person is pure of heart, it's hard to root for them when they fail to learn from their many, many mistakes. Unfortunately, the lead in Pet Sematary, Louis Creed, fits that bill to a T. Moving to the countryside with his family, the Creeds are met with tragedy when their tomcat is killed. Speaking to his neighbour, Louis discovers their home is near a mystical graveyard that can resurrect the dead. Though the cat is revived after being buried in the cemetery, he behaves like a mindless monster, lashing out and attacking anyone nearby. Things only get worse for Louis when his toddler, Gage, is run over by a truck. Overwhelmed by grief, Louis buries Gage in the cursed graveyard, causing him to be reborn as a murderous ghoul. After Gage slaughters his own mother, Louis has no choice but to put him down for good. Now, Louis should have known what he was getting himself into by reviving Gage after seeing what happened to the cat. In his defense, Louis was too grief-stricken to be thinking straight, so it's understandable why he acted the way he did, as unreasonable as it may have been. Having said that, Louis's next course of action is flat-out idiotic. Unable to cope with the death of his wife, Louis buries her in the demonic cemetery, naively believing it will work this time. It goes without saying that Louis' reunion with his beloved goes about as well as you'd expect. Number 2. Captain Rhodes, Day of the Dead. In George A. Romero's zombie threequel, a group of scientists and militants hide from the zombies in an underground bunker, under the thumb of the tyrannical Captain Rhodes. Now, there are few villains in horror that encapsulate the term absolute better than this self-appointed leader. Though the survivors devise practical solutions to fight off the undead, the deranged captain repeatedly dismisses their ideas and progress. When Dr. Logan showcases a docile zombie called Bub, proving that they can be domesticated, Rhodes has the scientist executed. And although he seems to care about his soldiers, Rhodes leaves them to die when the flesh-eating creatures break in. But since karma's a bitch, Rhodes suffers one of the goriest and most excruciating deaths in cinema. After being shot by Bub, Rhodes drags himself down a corridor, hoping to escape. As he opens a door, he sees the exit is blocked by a horde of hungry zombies. Turning to flee, Bub blasts Rhodes again, plunging him into the Revenant's arms. Before he has a chance to break free, the ghouls tear him in half and devour his insides. All Rhodes can do is scream, Shalkana, before succumbing to his wounds. Bravo, bub, bravo. Number 1. Hanover, Deep Rising. Deep Rising kicks things off with a bunch of mercenaries prepping to rob a luxury ocean liner. To their surprise, the hijackers discover that nearly all of the passengers are dead. After speaking with the ship's owner, Canton, the group discover the passengers were killed by a sea monster. Canton explains how this beast drinks all the fluids of its victims' bodies, forcing them to endure an unimaginably painful death. When hijacker Joey discovers his partner Hanover being consumed by one of the creature's tentacles, he hands him a pistol so he can put himself out of his misery. Even though the pair never saw eye to eye, it's nice that Joey offers Hanover a quick death. However, Hanover is such a jackass, he shoots at Joey, narrowly missing him. Turning the gun on himself, Hanover accepts his fate and pulls the trigger. After hearing an anticlimactic click, Hanover realizes he's wasted the last bullet on Joey. With no one to blame but himself for his immeasurable error in judgment, all Hanover can do is let out a soul-stirring scream before being slowly consumed by the malicious sea monster.